Is that now working now? Okay, thank you. My tenure as the 14th Secretary of the Smithsonian is just beginning. However, my relationship with the Smithsonian goes back to 1978, when I first joined the institution as a historian at the National Air and Space Museum. Then I served as the Associate Director for Curatorial Affairs at the National Museum of American History. And then finally, I was fortunate enough to be the founding director of the National Museum of African American History and Culture. I am pleased and humbled to assume the role of Secretary of the Smithsonian Institution, an institution that I love so much. But for most of our visitors, their first impression of the Smithsonian is of our iconic buildings on the National Mall, home to some of the nation's greatest treasures. What they may not realize is that the Smithsonian extends far beyond the mall. Since our founding, the Smithsonian has been a local, national, and global institution doing work that you might not expect. The global team that captured the first image of a black hole was directed by Smithsonian scientists at our Astrophysical Observatory in Cambridge. Researchers at the National Zoo and the Conservation Biology Institute work to reintroduce species that have gone extinct in the wild back to their native habitat. Experts at the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center track and monitor invasive species in every port in the United States. Though I've spent my entire career at the Smithsonian, I am constantly amazed because I'm learning new things about this wondrous institution. But all these incredible achievements are enabled by our facilities, which face tremendous challenges. Much of the Smithsonian's infrastructure is aging, with systems that have exceeded their lifespan. As a result, many of our facilities fall short of industrial best practices for their care and maintenance. This is the result of an accelerated growth in Smithsonian buildings that spans several decades. Currently, we have a maintenance backlog of just over $1 billion. A billion-dollar backlog may sound insurmountable, but it's not. Since becoming secretary, I've had a chance to look at this with fresh eyes. In order to be more strategic in our approach, I've directed our staff to begin analyzing our projects in a new way. Rather than simply seeing a backlog in total as $1 billion, I want us to analyze our maintenance projects building by building. With this approach, we have a better sense to communicate our existing priorities, develop a better sense of where our limited federal dollars are best spent, and find opportunities to address our maintenance needs as part of our capital revitalization projects. The strategic combination of capital projects with steady growth and maintenance from Congress will yield greater results. I believe that addressing our maintenance backlog is of paramount importance to the future of the Smithsonian. We are so fortunate to receive support of Congress in addressing our recent and most pressing infrastructure needs, the renovation of the National Air and Space Museum. Because of this support, we are on track. Exhibits in the western half of the building are scheduled to reopen in 2022 and to fully reopen in 2025. Beyond air and space, we are beginning to plan for the revitalization of two of our oldest buildings, the Castle and the Arts and Industries Building. This project will address physical deterioration, replace obsolete systems, install seismic protection, and incorporate modern accessibility and safety standards. Planning for this project is an opportunity for us to develop a vision how best to use these historic landmarks to better serve our audiences. Projects like this are highly visible components of our immediate facility needs, but many of our greatest challenges are behind the scenes. We care for 155 million objects, most of which are not on display. They are actively used as research objects by dozens of federal agencies, scientists worldwide. But sadly, 47% of our collection space is inadequate. To address this problem, we've begun implementing a collection space plan, an ongoing cycle of constructing state-of-the-art facilities, relocating at-risk collections, and revitalizing substandard spaces. We are making steady progress. We recently finished a collection space building at the National Air and Space Museum, Udvar Hazy Center. It was immediately used as swing space to help us move the artifacts from the air and space as it's going under renovation. And when the air and space is completed, that storage space will allow us to remove many of the aviation collections that are in poor conditions at Garber. We've got a planning phase for additional pods at the Smithsonian Museum Center, Support Center. And for this project, we are collaborating with the National Gallery of Art to share construction costs and operations of this facility. This is a win-win situation for both institutions. But as we look at potential future facility needs, there are many knowns but many unknowns. We know that our collections will grow. Research continues to advance and history unfolds before our eyes. And to continue to tell the story of America, we need to continue to collect collections. But we also know that we have to protect those collections in light of the changing environment. We know that Washington, D.C. will have more intense precipitation, increased storm surge, a rising Potomac, so we know that the National Mall may be at risk. We've already implemented preventative measures. We've moved many of the archives of the National Air and Space Museum out to Udvar Hazy Center. We have relocated objects from the ground floors of the National American History Building, which is really the building most at risk. And when we look to build new buildings, we did what we did with the National Museum of African American History and Culture. We made sure that water protection measures were incorporated into the design so that the Smithsonian, if they are mandated to collect to build new museums, we want to make sure that climate considerations will be crucial. The prospect of new museums is really the great unknown for us. The current proposals for a National Museum of American Latino and National Women's History Museum enjoy broad bipartisan support. As I've said to you and many others, if Congress deems it in the public interest to move forward with these proposals, we believe it's critical that any additions to the Smithsonian do not negatively impact our existing facilities, many of which I will outline for you today. A new museum needs funds both for the creation and the long-term operation, the care of collections, the building of staff, and the safety and protection of our visitors. It is my responsibility to ensure that all our museums, all our research centers are appropriately cared for. But I believe with proper support, we can create new museums that exceed our imaginations and build on the standards of excellence set by the Smithsonian. This desire for new museums reflects a need to ensure that our nation's cultural institutions provide a complete and inclusive representation of the American experience. We will work diligently to tell a broader, more complete narrative with the resources we already have. I'm proud of the work that we've done with the Latino Center and the Asian Pacific Center, and most recently, we've launched the American Women's History Initiative. All of these efforts work to make sure that the Smithsonian, beyond individual museums, creates programs, mounts exhibitions, and grows collections. The Smithsonian is the steward of the nation's museums, collections, exhibits, research, libraries, and educational resources. Our museums are powerful symbols of our shared cultural values. The buildings that line the National Mall tell the world what it means to be an American. Our cultural institutions are greater than the sum of their parts. They are more than bricks and mortar. Because of that, I thank you for taking the time to hold this hearing and making our facilities such a priority. It's a privilege to testify before you today, and I welcome any questions you have.